Ladies and gentlemen, let us begin a very interesting and engaging program called Theater and Virtual Reality, and our today's subject is Zoomers Don't Attend Theater, Generation Z's Perception of the Dramatic Arts. What is Generation Z? We're going to understand it during the discussion because soon we'll be joined by futurist and researcher Anne Boyson from the US, and she gives much of her time and many years of her life. Actually, she's given to this particular subject: what is a generation, how the generations succeed each other, and so on and so forth. But in general, the topic of this conference and the people presented here is the theater, and we have theater directors, we have theater producers, playwrights, and translators. I'm personally a theater critic. I'm Alexei Kislov. I'm also a theater producer. And so why are we here? What is the purpose of this conversation? The idea is to understand how this new unknown world functions, how we can understand each other, how things are turning in a cycle or they are not doing this. So that is the idea, understanding what the future holds for us. And the entrance point for this land of unknown will be the conflict of the generation change. Generation change, the way it affects theater art. In the 21st century, theater is competing with the world, in fact, because the world has moved almost completely to the digital space, and this particular conference is taking part in the digital space for more than half of the conference. And in the real space, we're facing some limitations such as face masks and other things. So there are many limitations indeed, and quite often it is easier to sit down on your sofa and watch a new Netflix series instead of going to the theater. It's risky. You can catch COVID or something of this kind. And in fact, people born at the beginning of the 21st century, they were born with an additional organ, the mobile phone, the smartphone, and they don't have much to do with the theater, I would think. I'm engaged in mobile theater that uses smartphones, so it may sound strange coming from my mouth, but we're generally looking forward to using this media to connect people to the real life, not the opposite. Before starting, I would like to introduce one by one the participants of this discussion that is supposed to last for 3 hours. I'm going to put them in the chronological order. I'll try to, and please forgive me for mispronouncing your name if I do. And I will give a brief presentation of each of you, and then we'll go into details at the next stage of the discussion. So we have with us Anne Boyson, futurist, futurologist and researcher from the US who studies the generation theater. Anatoly Proudin, theater director and curator of the experimental stage project at the Baltic House Theater, where we are now. Igor Perigudov, theater director, translator, chief director at the Russian Academic Youth Theater in Moscow. Then comes Anya Stelinsky, who's a project manager at Book Theater in Austria and a theater teacher. Natalia Sergeyevskaya, who is the producer of the Big Puppet Theater, and she's the development director and the director of the Project 27 in Moscow. Christopher Rupping, theater director from Germany, who's currently engaged in a Zurich theater. Ksenia Nikitina, who's a director and playwright from St. Petersburg, Rory Mularkey, a UK playwright, who's staged in almost, has worked in almost all London theatres, if you believe the bio. Then we have a Moscow playwright. We have Dmitry Kristyanki, who's a theatre director who does a lot in the social and artistic theatre. Yes, let it be this way. He's the ideologist of the so-called bad theatre. We have then Oleg Hristolupsky, who's a director and producer from St. Petersburg. That's it, I think. I hope I haven't forgotten any of you. And we're going to start the conference from a lecture by Anne Bison that will be dedicated to Generation Z in Moscow, in Russia. I would like to suggest everybody listening to Anne first and then taking notes of the questions that may arise on this topic. Anne, the floor is yours. We hope that you can hear us well and let us know when you're ready to start.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. So I don't know. I have the correct translation on.
Скажите, кто слушает перевод? Да, перевод есть.
Yes, everything is being translated.
And wonderful honor to be able to zoom in Austin. This, by the way, is a green screen. This is not my real background. Here. So, the later part of the day. I'm going to share my screen. Started. Oops. Looks like I'm having some issues with I guess we should have tested this before.
Вы нас слышите?
And if you can hear us, can you tell us if you're in Austin now? Or where are you?
I'm in Austin, that's correct.
Да,
Как там дела у вас? Расскажите, как там?
How is it going with the COVID and everything?
So it is definitely much higher here than it is in Europe, which is recovering a little bit more. Yeah, it's where we're on a second wave here.
Могу я вас попросить говорить к микрофону?
Can I ask you to keep the mic a little bit closer to your mouth because we are having pauses in between your sentences?
Okay. Let's see. Yeah, I still have issues with that. Yeah, it looks like maybe we'll have to improvise here. I'm not really sure what happened, but on just want to share my screen. I don't have.
Да, прямо сейчас мы ждем, пока Эн...
So as we are waiting and to manage the presentation on a shared screen, I'm going to say just a few words about. I'm going to share the stereotypes on the generation theater that I personally have. They are all awful. They are all horrible. So I think it may be a good start for a constructive discussion later. So I think.
I'll raise my finger this slide.
Простите?
Anne, could you say it
Can you hear
again?
me?
Yes, we can.
I'm sorry about this last minute.
Ура! Вы спасли нас от...
Perfect. So you saved us from my horrible stereotypes list, and we can start.
Okay, so let's start. Okay, sorry about that delay. So I have been very interested in looking into what Generation Z like in Russia. Obviously, first broad topic, and you speak many it's impossible. So if I am talking with friends that are not as known or you don't really see that around you, then please understand. Frank's just shut a lot of over. So I come from a background of strategic force, and what people being in interest is not really about thinking facilitate conversation where uncertainty is possible, where we can look at and see how these different types of was that the key element for uncertainty is very often it's the humans that are in the equation because as humans we have frequently change always think is going to happen. So I became very interested in generational change because very often when we see changes, it's at the generational level. And if you're going to understand changes in the macro environment, you can't really look at one specific area. So in this case, we want to understand how Generation Z is as an audience, but in order to understand this cohort and how they jive together, how they are as a species, so it's possible to just look at one particular depth and how they are in their environment, with the economic trends, with politics. I think very often we focus a little bit too much on the technological part because again, it's the cell phone is like an appendix to the youngest generation. But that is really only a means to a larger end, and we're really going to understand that we have to kind of understand all of these different domains. So Generation Z is really just the emergent property of all of these macro trends. So I thought it might be good to talk about this cohort when they are located in history. Like what is the time area that they're born into? All people ask me, when exactly is that year that generation was and it's not particular. It's not like humans change from one year to another. It doesn't matter. Oh, they were born in 2000. It's not like it changes so. But the whole idea that when we were born on how you're going to reality. So that's why we want to sort of have these kind of wide bucket and talk about as large time period. There is a generation that is younger than Generation Z. They're still children. It's very difficult to say exactly how they're going to evolve as adults. It's typically childhood and teenage years that people kind of set their personality. So it's difficult to say. And then we have an older generation who are mostly retired. But usually when we talk about the generations that are interacting in most realms of society or leisure, we're talking about generations, and it's Generation Z, X, Boomers, of course, being right after World War II. And so when we call Generation Z Zoomers, it's a little bit of a play on the word Boomers, except that this generation is, of course, named after the Zoom that we're using right now, because we believe that they're going to be doing a lot more of their social and professional lives over platforms like Zoom and digitally in general. Pew Research believes that one of the main predictors of difference in attitudes can be found in age cohorts. I would say that we could see it in age cohort, we can also see it in the location of time of when you're born. So it's not only being 20 versus being 40, but it's also being 20 at a specific historic moment. Because there are some things, there's certain aspects that you will grow out of it. But there are certain elements or traits that will be influenced by the and that's what we really focus on generational change. It can be very difficult to decipher out exactly what is the influence of the time period versus what is the influence of just being a specific age. You have a lot of data, especially when we try to look at many different cohorts in many different countries. It becomes almost a impossible project. So in my research, I try to use as many quantitative statistics as possible, but there's certainly first with a lot of anecdotal observations. But I think it's interesting that that age cohort has such an impact, almost more than that gender and a lot of other traits. And it's very often when we talk about generational theory, we look at these long waves in the economy, long waves in history. I think it's interesting to notice that modern generational theory is based on theories of a Russian economist named Nikolai Kondratiev. So many of you might be familiar with him. And the whole idea is that we have these long waves in history and long waves in time that is influenced by specific technological paradigms and a whole economic ecosystem that grows around underlying technology. And that sort of moves forward, and that humans in those time periods develop certain types of cultures and certain types of cultural responses to these different phases that they're growing up in. And it's been very useful for me as an approach to understanding a generation to a completely different place than people who are for them, in these different. And what is interesting is that we are now in the sixth wave, but it's interesting to see that each of these waves seem to be contracting. It seems to be that it's not that we're changing as we're moving forward, but that the changing was faster and faster. And it's caused by what we call exponential change. A lot of the changes that this generation has to deal with is changes that are on an exponential scale. So when you look at planetary health or lack thereof, climate change, biodiversity loss, if you look at automation, if you look at the intelligence, income inequality, and the social responses to all of these extreme changes that are happening in the macro environment, it is in response to change that seem like they're and it seems for this that they have been handed all these issues that past generations did not have to deal with. So even though earlier generations, every generation had to deal with the leftover problems from the generation before them, they haven't really had to deal with exponentiality. This idea that changes are happening so quickly, and the interaction between these changes are creating a society which is very different from the past. And this has actually brought on a whole new concept called solastalgia, which is a combination of nostalgia and solace. And so it's the concept of feeling nostalgia for the solace that one once feel in the environment that we live in. But the fact that there are changes in your home environment that are happening so quickly that you can't really retain what feels home, what feels safe. And when I look at these social movements, for example, around Generation Z, and when I read surveys, and when I talk to these young generations, when I do focus groups, what typically comes to me is that there is an uneasiness, and there's a lot of anxiety around losing a lot of that, which seems to have always been around. For example, the safety of having an environment where you sort of have a little bit of control. These extreme weather patterns that we're starting to see more and more of, that is actually creating its own level of anxiety. This is a generation that feels unprecedented anxieties than generations before did at the same age. And there's a lot of efforts into understand that. So some of that has been attributed to the fact that they have the world at their fingertips. So it's a double-edged sword in many ways, because social media has been part of those trends that can both open up the world for this generation, but it can also reinforce some of that negative perception of reality, or distorted perception of reality around them. But again, I think it's very important that we look at what type of technological paradigm we're in. And right now we are in that digital revolution. And this is, in many ways, it could be either a threat, but it can also be a tool. And I tend to fall on the side that digital technology is more a tool than it is a problem. So it represents both a problem, but also a solution for this generation. And it really has made it possible for them to interact with so many more people, to have access to a whole world of information. When I grew up, my family had something like 5 newspapers, and that was considered a lot at least where I grew up. This generation has access to the equivalent of 174 newspapers. And of course, they barely even look at the newspapers, because they get all of most of their news sources anyway from a curation of various social media and but one of the most common questions that I get in response to the generation is why do they have such a short attention span? And everybody wants to point to rising ADHD, which of course is a problem, and that there's always these clinical or explanations. But really, a very good explanation right ahead of us is that there simply is too much information. There is so much information that this generation has to deal with on a daily basis, that the time that can be devoted to information is not there. you wake up in the morning and you have 170 text messages or social media posts that you have to respond to. It's almost an expectation that you're there. Then you're not going to have time to really focus and to sit and watch the play that lasts for 2 hours. It's just not there. And we see that in Russia, as we see in many other countries, that there are leading more towards these interactive media, less and less by digital one-way media where you have a media house or a curation of content and a formal curator of contents, more that they want to be part of that. This is a very global thing. We don't just see this in Russia. We don't always see this in the US. I'm personally from Norway originally, and we see it in Norway. We see it in Scandinavia. It's a pretty common arrangement. So when we look, for example, at pandemic responses, and we look at these youngest generation response to the pandemic, they might actually be the generation that handled this the best. And again, I don't want to be one of those people who say that digital entertainment can replace physical reality. It really can't. Because when you look at the surveys, Gen Zers are very face-to-face oriented, actually more so than millennials. You find that quite often that they will say that they use these tools as a solution, but it's not a preference. So if they have the choice between being face-to-face with friends or going, for example, for physical mobility, they would prefer to do it, but they can handle this digital reality a little bit better than, or which what always different. He's so much more reliant on meeting. And this was documented for quite some time. So in many ways, it might have been a blessing that this happened now versus earlier, because they seem to be able to handle this. Of course, the teenage years and early adult years is a time for socialization. So it's not, it's a little bit of a weak replacement for reality, but it certainly could have been worse. We've actually recently looked at some mental health statistics that were covering the COVID experience of young people here in the States. And it turns out that we didn't have as bad as a decline during these months as we thought we would have had. And it could be possibly because these young people are able to keep a social network in spite of that. So what are the characteristics of this generational, or this generation of audiences as compared to others, or compared to early versions of young people? And I think that especially what I see in my research and the trends that I see most documented are fourfold: interactivity, sharing, activism, and also immediacy. And I've talked a little bit about that earlier, but one of the things that one of the trends that I've noticed for the past 5 years or so is that most of the, whether it's museums or performing arts or art exhibitions, most events that have some level of success are the ones that are interactive with their audience. Again, this is the selfie generation. This is the generation that wants to take part, they want to be part of the product. They don't want to just sit back and observe and be a spectator. So if it's possible to have them part, co-created in that process, then it might actually be more of a success. And then that brings me to the next. the next slide, which is about sharing, because this is the marketing. This is the generation that will take care of the marketing for you. I work a lot with companies, and very often they have big marketing budget, but they don't really know how to interact with their youngest the youngest consumers. Very often, I have to feel that you have to engage them. You don't have to spend a lot of money on traditional commercials, etc. You just need to plant something that they can use, and they can kind of co-create and walk that and make something. This was a hit that has been going on. I don't know if it made it to Russia, but the Doja Cat song, the Say So, went around on TikTok for months, if not even years. And I think that there's been a dance version, 2 million iterations of something of this dance version. And of course, that helped her success, or it helped her gain visibility among this generation and even beyond. And we talked about immediacy. This is the 5-second attention span generation, and it really isn't. It doesn't mean that you don't have that you only have to focus on the first 5 seconds. You have to have a good product. The main thing is reaching them immediately, to catch them while they're still in tune, catch them while they're still there. Because again, they have so much information, and you only get a few seconds to make a good impression. That's just the way it is when you're competing with a lot of voices out there. In activism, I think it's very difficult to separate this generation from their underlying concern. Again, this is a generation that in many ways are in a crisis for the reasons that I presented earlier. When you can't predict even the most basic of the macro trends around you, because they're constantly changing, and you see these wicked problems coming out of it, you need to feel that everybody around you is on your side, that they're getting the support that they can have to make change. So I think maybe that's why we see so much activism in this generation, and that this is something I'm observing quite internationally. This is a very outspoken generation. They know that they have to make some changes, and if it doesn't happen now, they feel like maybe it won't happen at all. So again, going back to what corporations and what companies are doing with this, is that they've really tapped into this sentiment, and they know that if they don't have the Generation Zers with them, well, then you could really have some problems with their PR. They could have some issues with their it's basically a part of brand management for them, which sounds very cynical, because it sounds like they are on that's the only reason that Generation Z activism is sort of an instrument which they can use to sell on product. But you can also see it the other way. Even if they understand it, then it's definitely something that the arts have to understand as well. That it's not possible to separate out art from the complete lived experience from the generation. And I can only say that I'm really, really amazed with the level of creativity and expressiveness that I see in young artists in Russia. This has been really, of course, I don't have as much inside knowledge or as knowledge as you guys have working in this space constantly, but the little bit that I have seen so far, it speaks to me, and it's very obvious that young generations really want to really tap into the ability that so many other young people are feeling around the world. And again, I see a lot of this the concept of solicitation, that it's about making change in order to preserve what is good. It's not so much creating change just to make change, but it's more to create the changes that we need to do in order to preserve what's good, what's healthy, and what feels safe, and what can help there have a better future. So this is what I have, and I look forward to an engaging conversation.
Спасибо, Энни. Спасибо, Энн.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And now I offer to ask questions to Anne, if you have, and maybe. So my first comment, and the question is about those events and those things that happen in the world and in the world space, which refer to the generation who were born in the 90s. First of all, this is post-irony, modern and new ethics. These three things which characterize today new cultural code, which is being formed at the moment, and it is very local. It doesn't have in its root some collective of people or some root. This is a very organic event of mankind, which has been created right now, right in front of us. We are witnessing it because of internet, and we facilitate expanding information and virus maybe. So that's why I wanted to ask you a question. As a person who is searching ways of living, of information in the new world, and how this information impacts and affects the consciousness of people. So what about post-irony? Is this the consequence of anything? If yes, then the consequence of what? Or maybe this is the birth of something new? And what is the future of the post-irony and irony? And what might happen from the point of view of cooperation between people in the future? Как
I first want to clarify the understanding of post-irony. I think my understanding of post-irony is that it's the ability to create satire around something you also take very seriously. Can you just clarify first that that's what we're talking about? Because that is a trend that I have observed with at least this generation. Yes.
Well, I know the definition of the post-irony as my definition of the post-irony is that the way of artistic statement when the attitude of the artist himself is not known for us. It is in the form ironic, but we do not know what the artist himself thinks about this statement. So this is some kind of a joke when a person doesn't make it fun, and we just can make a conclusion that it is a joke. And in reality, the author of this statement doesn't have any attitude to this statement. So this is like in the theater. But what I'm talking about, this statement is made not in the theater, but in the public space.
I do definitely think that there are signs of that. I feel that at least the early phase of TikTok, when TikTok really hit the scene, I couldn't really understand the skits. Then again, I'm not in the that is a lot of it just doesn't make any sense to me at all. And I talked to some Gen Z about it, like, why do you think this is funny? And they're like, oh, it doesn't make any sense. That's why it's funny. And what it reminded me of was the phase of data. Again, if you look at this, the history going in cycles, history not necessarily repeating itself, but rewinding. We had that phase of Dadaism, surrealism, in a time where there was so much going on in the world that the concept was to kind of show the ridiculousness of everything. And that's how I understand post-irony, that the message is not necessarily be overly obvious with motivation, but that possible to read in various interpretations. And often it's something that feels crazy in your environment.
У меня еще один вопрос к Энн.
Thank you very much. And one more question to you. Okay. So one more last question to Anne. I just wanted to ask you about, you spoke about generation cycles and some things which get repeated in decades. So there are some cycles. So if this is so, suppose futurists of the latest period, they created the the content that was continued in the 60s. But what about now? It looks like this cycle returns to us in a some changed way. So Generation Z, in this respect, do they really manifest anything? Can we say that they are opposed, that they have something to oppose to the older generation, whether they are like adversaries, whether the new generation acts like an adversary to the previously collected legacy. And if it is so, if they do oppose themselves to the older legacy, say, then what do they oppose? What do they contrast with? What's the subject? What's the essence of their opposition? Can you specify that?
I actually think that changes a little bit from possibly from there might be great regional variations. One trend that it seems to me that the emerging economies there's a little bit more optimism. It's the pessimism and the skepticism about the trajectory that are the aspirations put us on is mainly felt in more sort of like older. I believe, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I try to base my observations on more than one report. What we've seen in Western Europe and the US lately, we've seen a great urgence for reaching social justice, whether it's in there's racial groups, the movement. We've seen that, quite a bit, and in many other countries as well. A year before, we saw a lot of climate activists with record demonstrations all over the world, because this is an area that I think what it collectively speaks to is that older generations are not necessarily doing a very good job. And again, it's not sort of the same type of rebellion that I think that we've seen with young people in the past, where it was very much like, let's break the taboos, let's create something new because my mom doesn't like me to have So therefore, I have to have it's not really that type of rebellion, more political. It's more a type of rebellion that is to protect the future, to make sure that these grand ideas, these values that were professed to them by the organization, which they see a lot of hypocrisy because they don't see that they're acting on those values. They just want to make sure that they are actually taking place. So that's maybe the main difference that I see. Of course, because it's very important again to distinguish between what is a life stage. Being young, you are more critical of the people for you. You are more you want to create change almost just to make change. I don't think that there's any youth generation that is going to completely go through placidly go through those phases and not make itself known as a new generation. But I think this time we're seeing something a little bit different, and it is really a verdict on the older generation not having made it particularly.
Спасибо. Вопросы?
Thank you, Anne. And I give the floor to anyone who wants to ask any questions. Well, actually, I think you've asked everything we wanted to ask. So, thank you a lot, Anne. It was really interesting. So, don't leave us. We are going to interact more during the conversation with all the participants and come back to make a kind of, summary of what you've said. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This is really a pleasure.
Ага. Класс, спасибо.
Cool. Then, ladies and gentlemen, I think Anne's presentation offered important ideas for our discussion, for, you know, thinking together on different topics. And among these ideas, it is this information shower as one of the reasons of the superficial character that we're observing now, this attention uh, of the people under 21 years. I think the attention is not specific to any generation, but it should be more or less the same with all of them. And then another important subject was the demands of the global message, of the global statement of some ethic character. If we start a discussion, if we offer something to the public attention, there should be a mission and there should be a global message in it, like preserving the nature, preserving the ethics of the humanity. And the message should be clear from the start. This is the tendency that we can see in all the global expressions of the modern generation. So I suggest to discuss this subject and actually see how we can communicate with the new audiences in these spheres. We actually have a certain sequence of speakers. It's not a very simple thing to do. We did put some time into organizing this list, and I would like to give the floor, first of all, to Anatoly Proudin, who is here with us on the stage. And Anatoly is a boomer, indeed. No, I was born in 1945. I am from the previous generation, in fact. Well, it was post-tyranny from my side. Anatoly, well, tell me, first of all, clarify for me, post-tyranny, and you used two other terms, metamodern and something else. Please explain me what it is. Post-tyranny, you tried to explain, so I did get it. And the other one, metamodern, what is it? Moderator. Well, it is said not to have Anastasia Khrushcheva, who is the main expert in metamodern here. in Russia, and she did lecture on this in St. Petersburg. I think you'd better ask her because I still has not have not clarified it. For me, I do have an understanding of what it is. For me, metamodern is the exit from postmodern. It is the exit from the irony environment into the unfamiliar environment. In a way, it is the territory without any statement, without any position, of pure art, possibly. And the third one is the new ethics. New ethics is the territory without toxicity. And then toxicity, what is it? You see, I'm a millennial, so all my answers will contain such questions, such terms we're never going to stop. So, new ethics is a very interesting phenomenon which comes out of the Generation Z. Uh, it is they appeal to, you know, a good manners and sincerity. For example, if we say a boss addressing the employees, by the first name, that was not acceptable earlier, but it is acceptable today. So this is the new terms of acceptability and good manners that exist. Different things that were not okay in the past are okay now, and they have become traditional even. Um, so it involves our understanding of what is good and bad, the absence of hierarchy. The director's theater and new ethics are two opposing things. And theater and new ethics do have a conflict because, classical theater means you're subordinated to somebody, you have to obey them. And then it is about the relations between employees and those who are not employed, and all that concerns the idea of the good manners formed through the 20th century, but it was not applicable. All this should be applicable now, and you can add or correct me. Yes, I'm going to say a few words because new ethics is something that speaks to me. It is something very, it's not very determined, because on the one hand, it is an appeal to good manners. On the other hand, the borders, the limits are still unknown, and who determines the level of tolerance? Who determines the level of irony? This is not known yet. And this can have catastrophic consequences in the future, such as Rowling, whose career is degrading. It's a kind of a snowball thing. Some people say that this or that is funny and ridiculous. Other people find it unacceptable. So for me, it is, in a way, the borders being unclear, the borders between what is sincere and authentic and what is just a posure, and the difference between the real aims and the supposed aims. So this is my comment, this is my idea. I think from the moderator says, it is the question of terminology in the subject of generation change. In fact, we can discuss each of the topics separately with the experts. Otherwise, it is just useless exchange of opinions without any fruitful discussion. So I would like to move the focus a bit to the exchange of opinions, and uh, I would like to speak about the theater today, about specific new challenges that the theater faces, which are due to the generation change. And in particular, there is this phenomenon in Russia it is the theater for the young audience, and that's a very good idea. It is a state-funded network of theaters that offer productions for teenagers of the entire country. I don't think it exists abroad at all. So it's in a way it is some education in theater. It is not meant for adults. It is not meant for the children. So I would like to ask Anatoly, as a person who did spend some time within the Soviet system in the 80s, I would like to ask how the system then had to work, what was the idea behind it, did it ever function the way it had to, and is it capable of proper functioning? And then we'll speak about today too.
Well, ch children theaters, they are different. Are they supposed to be equal? No. They are supposed to be same in that respect that they're supposed to be artistic. They have to be brave, interesting, and so on and so forth. Because if you take an airplane or a train and go somewhere far, deep in Russia, and will go to children's theater in the city N, you will find that nothing has changed. If you go to the morning performance drama, for example, Pinocchio, and then you will go, maybe you will maybe then they will have a chance to see same performance of the 80s, Pinocchio of the 80s. You won't see any difference. And so this is the fact. In the 80s, there was Adolf Shapiro, director. There was TUS, Children's Theater of Zinovy Karagotsky. In the 80s, there was a Central Children's Theater where Borodin worked, the director, under the rule of Borodin. Yeah, right at that time in 1982, Borodin, Shapira, Karagotsky, Dodin. He used to work in the adults theater. He studied with Karagotsky. And I mentioned only those names which you know very well and are familiar with them, but there was the whole list of talented directors whose names you do not know, but those people also tried, and they tried hard to overcome the inertia of the theaters of second-rate theaters, mediocre theaters, because we were living in the times where it became worse and worse. The environment, the theatrical, artistic environment became worse and worse for children. And then in the 90s, there happened a different story, a real fight, a real battle in order to turn children's theaters into good theaters for children. And today, what our contemporary situation is, you can see beautifully made, very brave, talented theater. It is called youth theater. Youth theater today, the theater for children in St. Petersburg is a different theater. It's not the same theater as it used to be in the time between Karagotsky and Shapiro in the 80s. So those people who worked in the 80s, I think they did manage to turn all the audience, all the theaters into drama theater. And today, when we say Moscow Children's Theater, we imply something different. This is just an abbreviation. TUS, it's just abbreviation. But of course, we imply a little bit different meaning, or maybe different meaning. So what about turning of twos into a drama theater? Whether it means that the audience will change. Uh, Stanislavski was asked when children's theaters just began. You can imagine how long time ago it happened. So Stanislavski was asked what the performance for children should be, what should be the difference of the children's performance should be different from the adults one. And he said that it should be the same, but better. And you know, and this is the truth. This is the truth. So, for example, today, I had a cup of coffee in the cafe, and over there was a girl, most possibly the Generation Z, as you say. She had red hair, red eyes, red nails with different patterns. And she, in the context of new ethics, she asked me if I could wait for a bit, for 3 minutes, because she wants to take a cigarette. I waited for her and I asked her, does she go, if she goes to the theater? And she said no. And when I asked her why, she said, honestly, it is not interesting. It is not interesting. She was very honest to me. Well, I can tell you that any generation, every generation, goes to the theater with the only reason to have an interesting performance over there. When she goes to the theater, when they go to the theater and see falsehood over there, they understand that there is nothing for them to do over there. So today, unfortunately, we really turn our theaters into in the space which is adversary to the world, to the God, because instead of integrity, instead of the falsehood, we see that the awkwardness and cowardness is growing. But and plus, we are fond of money. We sincerely love money. And this is the fact which we didn't have in the 80s. And this is very evident, even judging by the price of the tickets. So the fact that the generation of Z letter, which is just being forming and creating at the moment, they're very young, they're just learning how to lie. They're just learning how to be cowards, how to be sacred. Of course, they are really, they have big potentials, they have got questions, and they do not want the theater to lie to them. So that's why today I think those experiences are very valuable today, of those directors who really attract people. If you go to Lensaveta, to the performance of Butусов, over there you will see many young people who with great interest keep watching 8 hours performances, 6 hours performances, because it is true, because it is brave, because it is sincerely done, and plus in such a very quick and strong form and beautiful form. That's why when I see people saying, and with very sadness in their voice, that young people didn't go to the theater, I know why. I know why. It means that we're doing something very wrong. This is it. We need to work better. As our great Stanislavski said, for children, we have to work in the same way as for the adults, just better. So this is it. This is my opinion. Thank you, Yegor. I've got a question to you. Yegor Peregodov is the chief director of the youth theater, and it was said here that the theater doesn't have its targeted audience. Theater is a theater, but if it is a good theater, then it might be interesting to any kind of the audience. Is what about the youth theater, and who is targeted for the school children and maybe a little bit older children? Whether the educative function, whether the theater carries educative function today. What do you think about that? Well, maybe our theater differs from other theaters in such a way that because we really have very big educative programs which goes in parallel with the regular performances. If we speak about theater, so yes, this is one of the functions. Educative function is one on the list. When people go to the theater to see Romeo, Julia, and Romeo, just to watch the theater, just to watch the performance, not to read the book, then the theater is, well, it doesn't work because they see the interpretation of the director. So, of course, it is still they need to read before they go and watch. It's just not enough to watch the interpretation of the director. So if we speak about theater as the substitution of the site briefly rue, where you can read short plots, short contents, short retelling of the plots of the novels, big novels, which substitutes reading. If we speak about children's theaters, so today we're celebrating 100th anniversary, and the theater has passed a very long way, and that was the first Moscow theater for children. So now it's the theater for youth, and many efforts we spend in order not to cease to exist just as a theater for children. I think it is needed for everybody. Most possibly we apply the model of a family theater, because it cannot be just a specifically children's performance. So children go together with their parents. If we speak about the big stage, and this is a general feeling and interpretation for the whole family. Parents understand in their way, have their interpretation, and children watch the same performance, and they understand what they got from the performance. Then they grow and they stop going to the theater. For example, when I was a kid, I used to go to the theater. When I grew, there was a period when for 3 years, I didn't go anywhere. I didn't read anything. I didn't go anywhere. Something was going on with me, some turnings, and then time passed, and I got back to the theater. So if we speak about the model of children's theaters, that the worst goes to the children's theaters. So, of course, this is not applicable. If in the your idea is like you invented the mobile theater. If we start it as a huge network covering the whole country, I think this idea will turn into a very boring routine. So everyone will have in their cellular phone a theater version of life. So people will get accustomed to it very quickly. So the Golden Key performance version of Pinocchio was written for a specific time and specific audience. That was a special engagement, special commission. But then later, because of the mass model of when the mass model was done, when I started, when I was a student in the university, the worst punishment for us to hear from our teacher that what we do is a children's skit, is a skit for children. So now, when we speak about Generation Z, these are people who are driven by their parents to theater. So these are their parents. They represent the generation, the previous generation. I can share with you our experience when we have a lab. It was called -10. When from zero we created plays written for children, because really we are lacking good plays for children. That's why we have classical things mostly, because there is no actually modern contemporary plays for children. And then we were looking at sketches, and one of those was really very interesting, made based on the play of Vasilisa. That was a choir, and so familiar plots on the background of the choir. And that was very successful. So that sketch lasted just 20 minutes, and that was with blood, with awful, awful folk. The sketch was based on the Russian folk stories with awful, awful, bloody episodes. So there were very many decisions which we believe to be very interesting. And when we started to develop it, thinking that we can continue with that project on the big stage, we cannot but think about what parents think, because parents go with their children. They want to get a portion of education, kindness, maybe a little bit of a boring classics, which is a necessary thing for children. And we understand that parents in this situation, that well, we see all that bloody stuff a lot in the computer, in games, and whatever. Theater should be something different. So we understand that the parent generation, which is my generation, we are parents. We are those parents who take our children to the theater, and this generation is not ready to be open and to accept those new things which is applicable to Generation Z, and would be very important and grabbing and initiating those feelings which would really lead children to theaters. So there is a possible conflict of the generation gap. So what kind of a strategy we have to develop and work out? Thank you very much, Igor. I just wanted to add, when you spoke about children's like performances, meaning bad performances. I have also an experience when I took my little kid to our tours. It was just accidentally we went there. We went to see a performance for children. So over there, all the props were very, very drawback, I would say, old-fashioned, outdated. But all those outdated things looked very contemporary and very interesting. So maybe the attitude, our old-fashioned attitude, maybe it is good, maybe it is appropriate, maybe there is no need to change anything. I think that in this respect, the theater itself is a very cool mechanism. Well, after pandemics, all theaters have questions whether people are going to visit, whether people do plan to go to the theater. Because it is not clear, it is not certain. We don't know. People are at a loss. People really have a very big requirement. They're really longing for going to theaters. They love theaters, but we are at a loss. What is going to happen? It will not happen to be the same. We changed the seating design in the theaters.
Thank you. And I would like to move on to the next part of our discussion. And I would like to offer the floor to Anya Zielinski, who is a theater teacher and the project manager of Brook Theater in Austria. Anya is the head of the theater studio as a teacher and also as the artistic director. It is a special, I would say, trend of the theater that produces content for the youth, if I understand it well. So could you tell us, Anya, about the theater, about how this part of your theater work that is socially oriented in Vienna is structured? What about the education of the young audience? So let us welcome Anya. How it is going in Austria? Are the theaters open yet? And then please answer my question by explaining what you do in your theater.
At first, thanks for the invitation. And I start just with the Borg Theater. So the Borg Theater is one of the oldest traditional theater in Europe. It has 4 stages. The Borg Theater has 1,175 seats, the Academy Theater 5,000, Casino 2,050, and the smallest one was 60 seats. And this is the largest spoken theater in the German-spoken world. And in 2019, Martin Kuschek came as the new director to the Borg Theater. And with his team, he's striving for a new direction. There is a European idea and the wish of more general internationalization in the theater. And we work with artists from all over the world, and not only the ensemble is more diverse than before. We also have a lot of international directors from Australia and America, writers from Canada, also just, and actors from a lot of different European countries. And our ensemble, for instance, is from Iceland, Turkey, Germany, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, Ukraine, Hungary, Israel, and of course we have a lot of Austrian actors and actresses. And we try to work with these diverse languages also on stage. For instance, in Vögel, Birds, by Vachimur Avat, and it's a piece with the Israeli and Palestinian conflict, and it's dealt with 2 young main actors, and they're in the context of New York, Berlin, and go back in history and reality to Israel and Palestine. And on stage we have German, English, Arabic, and Hebrew. So it is something new for the audience, and we also try to work with different languages for all the audience, the youngest and the older audience in general. But of course, we are a classical theater, and there are just some parts where we can try out this kind of project. And within the Borg Theater, we also build up our own label, the Borg Theater Studio, where we produce plays for young audience. Accordingly, we also produce plays with themes that interest this generation, and this is sometimes what is for the big stages and what is for the young audience. We have big discussions about this always with our dramaturg department. And I want to different between the ages because we have stage readings for 5 years old kids and their families. We have plays for kids from 6, from 8. We have plays for kids for the age of 12, 11, 14 years old kids. And we have also pieces and the rest of the program of our theater is from 16. So there's it's not easy what is for whose age always, but we work, we have some pieces, they are really on the label Burgtheater Studio. And for this program, for the Burgtheater Studio, we came the smallest stage, the vestibule. This is only for the young audience, and we also play one or two pieces in one season on the other stages in Casino, or next year we will play in the Academy Theater as well for the youngsters. And exactly 1 week ago, for instance, has had das Kaisers neue Kleider, the Emperor's new clothes. This had premiere in the Casino. And we had an adaptation of the famous Jane Austen novel Pride and Prejudice by Isabel MacArthur with students from the Max Reinhardt Seminar. So in general, the Burgtheater Studio stands for the promotion of young talents, and in a lot of different ways. We work closely together with the acting schools in Vienna, and the students act in our plays the main characters, and so the students of the Max Reinhardt Seminar are very young themselves. This is very attractive for young people, or our young audience. They see their peers on stage, and at best they are also dealing with their own topics. And there's another form, the studio ensemble. It's called the studio ensemble. This is a form to promote young people between 15 and 25. These youngsters are selected in workshops and castings, and then they become the young ensemble to our big ensemble, and they work then in a normal repertoire arrangement of the Burgtheater. And young roles in these pieces, they are played by the teenagers, while the adult roles are played by the actors of the Burgtheater. So there is a connection to learn from each other. The old actors learn from the power of the youngsters, and the youngsters learn from the professionals, from the long working experience. And that makes a special energy on stage, what a young audience very love to see that on stage. These kind of productions are always full. They and this is very attractive for our audience here in Vienna. An example of a play that is from the studio ensembles is the last. It's Kriegerin, Warriors. Oh, what is this in English? Sorry for that. Warriors. This is a piece about the new right-wing tendencies, and how quickly one person can drift groups like that, and how can lead a group dynamic a person into complicated political conflicts. This is a very powerful 14 person on stage, and 12 of them, they are youngsters, and 2 are the actors of the Burgtheater, and there's a mixture of a very energized way to talk how quick you can go in strange spaces of political conflicts. And the new production of Book Theater Studio is Jabba by Markus Youssef, for instance. This also deals with a political topic, and it's about the headscarf. What happens when two cultures collide, and what does have to do with their own identity. And also we organize many events in close cooperation with institutes of the city of Vienna, like Brunnenpassage, and they are much more connected with a much more diverse audience. And this is called the Young Academy. The artists of the Burg Theater, they work together with citizens in the city. And an example for this, Oliver Frielich, maybe is a name for you, you know. Oliver Frielich directed a piece for the Burg Theater last year, and afterwards he led the project with youngsters and together with Svetko Horvath, a philosopher. And this project was called School of Opposition, and young people and adults of many different nationalities worked on the topic, ranging from participation in the theater and the high cultural life in the city, and to fair play and social networks. And there were a lot of oppositions in the group, with the participations and with the group and the theater. They wanted to ask all the members of the Burg Theater what they learn, and to show what is with their life and what is with our life, and it makes a very own circle and exclusion topic in the theater themselves. And at the end, we had a big presentation in the casino for free, of course. It was the topic, and at the end, our finance director said, "Okay, we don't take money for this project." So we tried to find also new audience and new groups and with projects, and afterwards they become audience by themselves, not only because of the project. And after this performance, we had a panel discussion at the Brunnenpassage, and it was live on the internet as well. And at the end, it was directly after the lockdown, we had a digital exhibition in the Kunsthalle Wien. They were also partners of this. And all these projects were designed by the participations. And this year we will do 5 more of these kind of projects at 5 different locations in the city on the topic body and power. And there will also be a feminist project on the topic of being a woman and what and how has to be a woman. And this project will be with young women from the 10th district in Vienna, where a lot of different cultures live. So we try to get the conclusion and the oppositions of different cultures in this view of this topic. And after 1 month, there will be a little festival where we show these presentations on 2 different stages in the Burg Theater. So taking part and experimenting is a very important focus of the Book Theater Studio. So we also have in this session or in the season for us for 16, now it's 16 different laboratories. And laboratory means the participants will learn about different themes from theater over a period of 10 weeks. And they work with different artists of the Burg Theater. And so they get a very deep view in the theater.
Аня, простите, а можно я вас немного перебью?
For example, theater music.
Sorry, Anya, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Anya? Anya?
Слышите ли вы нас?
Laboratory
Да, окей.
taught by a choreographer who actually trains our actors. Or performance theater and new media. This is, for instance, a laboratory for youngsters from 10 years, where the participants compare theater, gaming, and social media. And so, who are the heroes in the social media, in the gaming, and in the theater? So, they produce their own performances to get, and we try to get them from their own interests and their heroes and make connections to the heroes of the fictures in the theater world. So, just to get them from this generation Z and digital life, to bring them and connect them with the themes in the theater. And or there's another, it's called Clown Workshop, and this is not only a workshop about the movement of clowning, it's also about spirituality, yoga, or being in the moment. So the teacher is an artist from Berlin, and also a person who's very has a big spirituality, and so we bring also in that laboratory different positions together, an artist work and the spirituality work. So, so this when the audience who take part in these laboratories, they can take something for the private life, of course, they get a lot, and also they become close connected with our theater. And for instance, the laboratory dramaturg, or
Аня,
the
здравствуйте, еще раз
dramaturgy
нас...
Anya, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can I? Can you hear me? Yes. I'm sorry to interrupt you because we'll talk about it a bit more in detail later. We just will switch the topic right now, and if you don't mind, I'll interrupt you here.
Кажется, что...
So
Okay, it looks like Burg Theatre really works on many issues. It's a big laboratory, and they run lots of programs of hiring new and creating new professionals among new generation, and with the main mission to oppose to the digital space. It's very interesting, really, because I want to pay you attention that those things that Anne told us, that theater is much more important than what is it, because we didn't hear about digital technologies or some tries of synthetic forms like trends we have in Russia. Maybe they do exist, but we will talk then later about these things. What we are going to discuss, is it really more important? What is it about? So this question, what is it about? So now I would like to invite Natalia Sergeyevskaya to join our program, and she is a producer of the theater project, Theater 27. I know that Natalia has her presentation, and this is a very new project in St. Petersburg. Then that's why it would be very interesting to know how far it is new, how new it is. So it is directly related to the theme of our conference.
Из-за коронавируса вынуждена быть на удалении. Меня тоже постигла эта участь, но надеюсь, что все хорошо закончится. Всем большое за очень интересное выступление. С удовольствием слушаю. Я хотела рассказать немного свои мысли, коротко буквально поделиться. Год назад, сейчас я секундочку все включу. Да, год назад мы создали театр. Театральный проект 27.
social project 27, though I've been working in a very good state-budgeted theater, but there was a desire to create something, to do something by myself. And these are just a couple of ideas and different contemplations that happened with us within a year. So the idea of this theater just was born once from the post of a blogger, Olga Karalevich, who posted a list of good performances for teenagers in St. Petersburg that collected this information from her subscribers. And she has a very good St. Petersburg with very educated mamas. And I was surprised by the fact that that was a list from the 19 titles, which is actually very little for our city, because performances for 6+, just at least in one theater, you can count many of them. So there are many really performances for little audience, about 6 years. So 19 names is not much. So by statistic, the figure that you see is from 2018. It shows how many teenagers live in our city, about 80,000, and every year this figure differs. That's why we just used to like very much the teenage theater, and we decided to make our own project. What was important for us in this project, that young directors work here and young creators, especially in their last performance. Our all people who worked on it, they haven't reached the age of 30. These are young people who bring this new wave to new theater for children with contemporary texts, either original texts which we by ourselves will write this plays. These are not classical fairy tales. And the main idea why we, the main idea of our theater, the reason why we made it, we want our relations to be ecologically pure. This is between relations between us. We try to be very careful to each other. We pray for love. And this is what nearly all the theaters miss. And yesterday I saw the interview of Dud and about Silicon Valley, and I was really surprised that Silicon Valley values are more important for our people than the local values, because theater raises very interesting things, supposed to raise very interesting things. Even my generation of millennials are really are on alert at the moment. We want to follow the human values. And besides, I, for myself, decided this is not going to be a theater for poor people. Of course, I can ask people who work with me to do everything free of charge for me. No, we do not want to do a cheap theater, because at the time we are in the modern times, we do not want to have poor artists. We believe that the theater should gain money, should work well. It's not that we have to go to the Starbucks for part-time jobs to gain money for our life, and then to go to the theater and work there on the performances. I believe that the theater should be healthy in this point of view. Within a year, lots of time we spent at home. So first of our drama was an essay about Steve Jobs. That was a performance for teenage that was unusual and very interesting. All that was made on the basing on the laboratory person. I thought that we would work with different characters. Just very in a short period, just recently we made there was a performance about Stephen Amundsen. Well, anyway, it's kind of a very attractive performance, and we saw very many boys there. And of course, the director, Ivan Pachin, he created the story not just about Steve Jobs, the story of his success. It's not that, well, the modern boy have to pass through the circle of life, same as we pass through. We want to share our knowledge with the teenagers. They don't know what is going to be there in the future, so we have to tell them that it's not dangerous to fall. You just have to be brave. Another performance which we have, it's a different. It is called Fox Piece, based on the book of a Scandinavian writer. So with this performance, we had a different story. So can you imagine the way me looking at this work as a producer? I understand that my theater is not known. This is a mono work of the actor who is not known at all. His name is not familiar. He is not a celebrity, but he's very talented. He's a very good person, a good actor, but nobody knows him. Another thing is that where we and the theater itself is not the Mariinsky, so the place where we put on this performance, it lasts 2 hours and 45 minutes. And the melody of this and the intonation of this performance is very lyrical. In general, it's very lyrical, no attractions there, no laughter there. And of course, as a producer, it makes me be very surprised. I'm a little bit shocked because this is what I was taught, that things like that, they are not going to raise money at all. We're not going to sell tickets for that. So all these aspects really worried me, but reality showed that even now, when we have pandemic, we already played it 6 times. So it makes that 600 people saw this performance, and we get response from the teenagers. It was very interesting, and I really didn't expect that there would be such a success, such an interesting work. Even journalists get surprised that teenagers get silent, are silent during the performance, and they can understand the performance of one actor for 2 hours. So not all theater critics like this performance, but the press covering was very positive. And even on the Channel 1, there was a report made about this drama, really very positive. So, of course, it shed light on our performance and proved that there are very many stereotypes that we have in our head. And, of course, the work of producer have to be supported. Whatever the director does, just trust him. the story is interesting, and because it is told by a boy, then teenagers were very interested to. Another story is about Tony Hawk. That's a skateboard. I don't know why we're interested about American characters, but anyway, this is how it happened. Because the game was very interesting with Tony Hawk. People ask me if I'm not afraid to make this, but these are very good words. How to speak with a teenager, and we say there is no any recipe, just the way you speak to a human being. You speak with a human being same way you speak to anybody, because they are humans. So thank you very much. And I just wanted to show you very, very quickly one more thing. I wanted to show you just my research that was made by my friends on the about teenagers. Well,
Немного, надеюсь, будет немного времени для того, чтобы дозадать вопросы, которые не успели, обсудить то, что не успели, а иначе мы...
things which are left, because we've got Christopher Rupping waiting for us from the Swiss theater, and we also have some questions to him related to the feeling of time, feeling of rhythm. We haven't been talking about that, but I believe it might be one of the key aspects of those changes that refer to the language of the theater. No matter, let us get to know if he's connected with us. Christopher, are you with us? Да, здравствуйте. Just a couple of words about Christopher. He's a director from Germany, and he worked as a director in many theaters, who started very actively as a director, a professional, an expert. He has been working in Thalia Theater, in many other theaters. Now he is working in the Swiss theater. He was awarded with a prize called a Director of the Year. And as far as I understand, people speak a lot about you after you made a performance which lasts 10 hours. Deines Stadt, and just because we're really short of time, I just want to ask you a question about how do you feel about in YouTube, there is an event when they have some very stupid or silly video or trailer which counts lots of followers, and there might be a response that people say, I want to have a 10 hours version of this movie. And after that, this model might be repeated. People really place in the YouTube 10 hours trailers, whatever. So we understand that the 10 hours version of a drama play, this is something really, it's interesting. Who is that audience who can stand 10 hours performance? Because you have another performance, some other performances. So the question is, how comes that if we have the audience today, which which hardly stands the 10 minutes performance, at the same time there is the audience which is really keep silent and have patience enough in order to watch the 10-hour performance?
Question, I think, and to be honest, I don't know why it's like this 10-hour show that we did. It's always sold out. It's always a very mixed audience. There are young people in it, older people in it, and I feel like So in the beginning, Anne said that this generation that we're talking about, that they really have, it was called like a criteria called immediacy. So you have 5 seconds to grasp their attention. And I feel that's stressful for everybody, especially also for the young people. I think when you're on your phone and you have 5 seconds to decide if you like someone or something, then you're constantly asking yourself, what do I like? Do I like this? Do I want this? And then you swipe left or you swipe right. And in this 10-hour play, you are relieved of the pressure of immediacy, because you go in there, you know it's going to take 10 hours, and you have time. It gives you time to make up your judgment if you like it or if you don't like it. So I think in a way, one could say that if a young generation is used to really fast and fast judging forms of art, that it could make sense to adapt that for theater, but it also could make sense to do the exact opposite. You know, to have them expose themselves to like 10 hours and you're sitting there. There are breaks in it, right, in the 10 hours. And you can go on stage, you can smoke there. It's with stage diving. There's a little club in a break, so you can dance. It has a high Instagrammability. There are a lot of things that you can like document and put online. But also it relieves you of the stress you face in the rest of your life. So I think you would imagine that 10 hours is hard for them, but I think it's actually easier for them than a 2-hour play. I think 10 hours is so much, there's comfort in not having to judge so fast. And that's why I think people are coming to that from every generation.
Thank you for your answer, Christopher. As far as I understand, the theater can be a kind of an oasis in the information storm where you can come to meditate and have some peace. I hope that you stay with us till the end of the conversation, and just to have enough time and to keep up with the schedule, I would like to give the floor to Ksenia Nikitina. Ksenia, we haven't talked about playwriting so far. I would like to say, as a practitioner, to ask you as a practitioner whether there are any rules with working with a young audience. Ksenia, well, you know, I think when you say about taboos, it is about the separation between the state theaters and the small independent theaters like the Project 27, because unfortunately there is this tendency that the state theater has lots of commissions for staging the classics because they do want to attract a big audience. You know, they want to have the names that can be easily recognized. That is why they are pretty much limited in the choice of the place to stage. It doesn't mean that for the state theater they have worse plays. No, it is not as topical as it could be. There are some projects that talk about bullying, about violence, blood and everything. We had such a project called Hard Adulting with teenagers. We interviewed teenagers, and they became the basis for a production. It was very interesting because the participants were teenagers, but they were age limitations that prevented them from seeing it. So they could participate, but it was 18 plus, 21 plus, so it was for older viewers. And that is the problem. We did not discuss interesting topics. We took the teenagers to laboratories for the children theater, and they said, well, it's a fail. We don't speak like this. We don't think this. Why do they say that kissing is bad? And, there is a girl who gave birth and she's our age. Why do they say this? And this is the tendency that we observe in Russia. Why don't we talk about activism theater as they do abroad? And we use internet. We address internet for support in this case because the censorship is milder there. If at the theater we try to avoid the topics, you package it well so that it's not in the forelight. Those who want, they will understand. In the internet, we put the 18 plus limit, but we understand that teenagers and children watch this and they see this and they react, because we recently had a festival of melodrama that was held online during the coronavirus epidemics, and there were about 200,000 or 600,000 views, depending on the lives. And we're going to have a Corona school project for children, for teenagers, and it will be mostly online because we want to use the opportunities, take this theater and cinema and animation, mix it all together into something new. We don't yet understand what it could be, but this is interesting, and we have it thanks to Corona. Moderator, and what about the methodology of a playwright's work when we say that the modern children and teenagers only keep attention for a short period of time? When we speak about the theater, for a person whose mind has been shaped by internet and very dense information content. Answer: well, we speak about those 5-10 seconds, but this is not true. In the real life, that's not it. When you are watching a video, you can actually skip episodes, but if you have real life action, you will be there for 10 hours. There is no problem. It is not the problem of Generation Z. The millennials had the same limit of attention. I cannot myself watch the same thing for many hours unless I'm meditating, and I think it will be the same one for my grandparents. Well, compare one of the old old movies with Rick and Morty, which is blood and everything. Well, compare it with the Black Mirror. There is no action, but it's popular with the kids. It's because the episodes are short. Well, then the length of the still is quite considerable. The question is what you want to say with this. And we would like to try mixing the genres and we add new genres for syncretism, and we try to synthesize. I don't see any problem of those 10 seconds when writing plays. If you're talking interesting stuff, you're being listened to. If you lie, you're not. Moderator, well, this is what Anatoly talked about. You don't have any specific audience, but you have to understand the artistic level of the audience. It doesn't matter. If you're producing something beautiful, it will be understood and it will attract the audience. Either it will work or not, but it does not depend on the audience. And the same, actually, a playwright follows the same principles as he or she was in the middle of the 20th century. Answer: yes, exactly. The same rules, the same laws. And if we come back to the question of the quality, you don't want to, lower the quality when you write for the kids. We talk to the kids as we do to adults, but then on the stage, it's not the same thing. And this is not acceptable. Be sincere, be frank. If you are interested yourself, then the kids and the parents will be interested. You can check it. Moderator, is there any taboos in a children's theater or any must? Answer: do you mean the law? Moderator, is this your answer? You mean the penal code? Answer: yes, exactly, because there is a number of subjects that we cannot present to the younger audience. There are age limits. It does not always correspond to the reality, to the things that those kids of this age actually know and learn about. Why don't we speak about parent violence at the theater? You cannot. No state theater will accept this, but a laboratory will, because it's more interesting, because it's more topical. I think this is the problem. It's social, and it's the problem of understanding of what we want to learn our kids. Do we want only to show them what is nice and kind? It doesn't mean that the life is the same. We just need to have the balance between the things and talk about everything. And Anatoly, well, that's it. But if you go to a hospice and you know there are papers there, they say bring your children there, and it's important for kids dying to see this, and it's important for your kids to see it. And that's the hypocrisy of a children's theater. There are some taboos on the subject. Yes, I support it completely. Moderator. Igor, as a representative of the state theater, I would like to object. I would like to offer my opinion. I don't think it is purely an ethical question. It is the balance between ethics and aesthetics. It is not true that you ban all violence as a subject from the theater. The question is, if I'm a young director and I want the violence on the stage, or I want it documented, I want it researched, I want an installation on violence. This is the question. The question of the form, the question of the presentation, it is not the question of the subject. In Italy, as a representative of a state theater, I would like to say they are horrible, those state theaters. And from my point of view, it is the question of our cowardness or of our bravery. Personally, I think that the taboos in state theaters, they have been invented. Yes, there is the law. There is the law that does not allow you in a state theater to show documentary plays and productions that only, you know, have this language, the argot of some social groups. But the subjects are not tabooed. Moderator, but Yulia Tsvetkova from Vladivostok is now been heard at the court for staging. Do you know what the subject was? It was a production with children, with teenagers. It was about gender, about different genders and sexuality. But according to the testimonies, there was nothing shocking or, you know, unjust in this particular production. But this particular incident shows and explains the fear of the state theaters of, you know, staging something that is a little bit too brave to be acceptable. And I think that this is the reason. Xenia. Well, there is also the relation between the director and the playwright. We have this director vision of the theater, and I'm speaking about what the theaters commission. I was happy enough for the state theaters staging something that happens, that starts where the action starts with the mother's death. That was okay for them, but they have more commission for safe subjects, the subjects that keep them safe rather than subjects that are topical. Igor, well, I think we'll have to ask it later. The representative for the Berg Theatre, who finances them and their laboratories, because we understand that plays and productions for kids bring money to the children, to the theaters, in order to set up laboratories to produce more plays and so on and so forth. It's probably not the question for this conversation, but it is essential, because if you have 800 places, seats in your audience hall, how do you make 800 people come? What do you put in the production moderator? I hope, I think we can address this question to Rory Mullarkey, who's our next speaker, who exists in the system, in the economic system of independent theatre of the UK, that has a different approach, that has a different attitude, and Rory Mullarkey's productions are shown, I think, in all the theatres of London, at the Queen's Theatre, in all of them, in the Globe of Shakespeare, and so on and so forth. And Rory translates some of the plays written in Russian by Russian, Belarusian, and Ukrainian playwrights, and he participates in the Independent Theatre of Belarus. And I would like to address you, Rory, the question that Igor asked about the modern playwriting, experimental playwriting for teenagers, for the youth. How do you find financing for this, and how do you get a big audience for such theatre, for such plays?
Hi, thanks for having me. I think in the London theatre scene, the London theatre scene is very diverse, and there's a lot of commercial theatre, often productions of classic plays, juxtaposed with the more radical stuff, and the idea being that all of this stuff can somehow influence each other and help pay for each other. But it's definitely the case that the more experimental productions, the productions which are perhaps geared towards a younger audience, both aesthetically and in terms of wanting to say radical things about the world, are going to be the productions that are less commercially and critically successful. And so they are the kind of productions that the theatre has to feel its artistic imperative to stage. I think I personally gravitate more towards those productions myself, and I tend to write more in that style. And it's definitely the case that the old guard of London theatre scene, the audiences who are largely elderly, the critics who are also largely elderly, and a lot of the people who feel like they make the taste of the scene are not particularly engaged with or fans of this kind of production. I did a show, it's interesting talking about attention span from earlier. I did a show that operated very quickly. I mean, on an aesthetic level, on a dramaturgical level, the events of the play happened very, very rapidly, without much subtext, without much explanation. And I found that this was a thing that I was criticized for by a lot of the older audience members, because they expected plays to have more build-up, to have more exposition, to have more setup in what they were doing. But I decided to get rid of all that, because I felt like people today who are used to absorbing lots of different information very quickly from lots of different sources are more able to follow a story without much exposition. And so I made an aesthetic choice to do so, and found that the younger audience members just completely got it, that they understood that what I was trying to do was to represent the world as I saw it and life as I feel it is lived today. And it was the older audience members who have a conservative, more conservative view of what a play should be aesthetically, and feel I should perhaps have observed rules set out by people like George Bernard Shaw, and done more, sort of set it up in a more realistic way. I mean, this even went down to the location. So it was a play that asked the audience to imagine lots of different locations very quickly. We didn't do that with naturalistic setting, or with lots of lighting changes or set changes. We did that. We just asked the audience to keep up with it through the storytelling of the actors. And again, this was something that I found was much more easily imbibed by younger people, and also I think people who hadn't gone to the theatre very much before, whereas the people who were very used to the theatre, who were very invested in a kind of conservative naturalistic theatre, were more confused by this different way of doing things. So on some levels, I don't necessarily think it isn't just a generational thing. It isn't just about young and old. It's about how open-minded you are, how willing you are to watch a work of art which might unfold in a way that you're not used to. And I think perhaps people who are just are unfamiliar with the theatre as a whole are kind of counterintuitively more able to open their minds to a different way of storytelling, because they don't have so many preconceptions and so much baggage about what they think something should be. So I suppose that's the sort of the overall concern. There is an avant-garde scene, I think, in London, but also there's a commercial scene, and the two don't really meet, except interestingly in the big state theatres, which try to produce both strands of work. But often, if the public are confused about what kind of work they expect to see in a certain kind of space, for instance, if they go to a big state theatre and they see something that feels more radical that they would normally expect to see in a smaller theatre, they might be more confused than if they came to the big state theatre and saw a Shakespeare play with a famous actor from the television in it, because that's what they usually see.
Как вам кажется?
How do you think? What about the digital theatre? As for the digital theatre, whether they really show versatile possibility, different possibilities, like this spring, for example. If it is possible that digital theatre will remain as a entity, or it will just disappear. No.
What was interesting about the spring is it felt like there were lots of theatres in the UK who very quickly commissioned lots of work to be performed on Zoom or online, but ultimately they knew that this thing was they undertook the project with the idea that it was a stopgap, or that it was solving a problem, rather than as a genuine artistic experiment into finding new possibilities of how to work. Obviously, that is often how new possibilities arise, is when there's a necessity to do so. So I'm not inherently saying that that's a bad thing, but I think a lot of the form wasn't very rigorously interrogated. So it was very much just sort of write a monologue, or I got asked to write a lot of monologues, like you would see a monologue in a theatre, but it's a monologue that can be done on Zoom. Just go and write that, rather than really thinking about what the form of digital theatre means and what that means that you can and can't do, and how it is a different medium from the theatre. In some ways, it was a difficult ask for live theatre to immediately move into this digital space, because it's almost the antithesis of what live theatre does. But I think there are other things that might be that could be taken or forward or learned as lessons. For instance, that now a lot of productions that are happening in London are being filmed and broadcast around the country as a result of this situation. And that was a situation that we just couldn't see. I don't live in London, so I just couldn't see plays unless I went to London, because that's where most of the plays happen in the United Kingdom. So now I can either watch a stream, or I can go to the cinema and I can watch it. And that seems to be a situation which has really taken off, has really accelerated because of the results of the pandemic. And I think if we can keep on that front, understanding that ultimately the live performance is the beautiful, truthful thing that we want, to see, but also that for people who can't see it because because there's a pandemic, because they live in a different city, there are possible ways of engaging with this work and bringing that to people. That could help bring theatre more to the next generation.
Спасибо, Рори.
Thank you. That's very interesting. I hope that you will stay with us till the end and we will have an opportunity to ask you questions. So now we are skipping over another speaker and can get back to Christopher. Christopher? Yeah. Are you with us? Are you with us?
Да, Кристофер Рюпин снова с нами. Я хотел бы в продолжение...
I would like to ask you to share with you what you think about confrontation of digital theater and the real theater, because according to my observations, professionals believe that there are two camps: those who understand digital theater as the combination of different forms, and another camp, these are those people who think very radically and they really accept the digital theater as the enemy to the real theater. So to what camp would you refer yourself? How do you see the situation? What's the difference and confrontation between two camps?
Choose a camp. For me, it's obvious that theater in the digital space is no threat for the theater in the analog space. I think if the analog space is inaccessible because of the pandemic, we need to look for other stages to work on. Otherwise, we will be silent, and the most important decisions and dialogue on how a society wants to come together, wants to live together, will be done without us. So I think it's super important to look for other stages if our stages are not accessible at the moment. I feel like there's two different things for digital theater, as Rory mentioned as well. There's like the streaming of shows that were done for a theater and that then get broadcasted into the world. What I like about this is that it's more accessible than a theater. You don't have to go to a place. You don't have to buy a ticket most of the times, which is also a problem, by the way, but it's like that. But there's also something bad, because I feel like if you've never been to a theater and then you watch a recorded theater performance, it's hard to understand what is happening. To me, theater always feels easy when I'm in the room, no matter what the theater is. I think even if I'm not an expert, then I still can feed off the energy from the actors on stage. I can see that all this is happening live, and it's very easy for me to understand once I'm there. With a stream of a recording of a show, it becomes super abstract to me. I see it online, and it's really, really, really complicated for me to understand what it is. I can do it because I work in theater, but I don't know if it translates well to people that are not used to watch theater shows, that are not experts. So I feel like while streaming theater shows that were done for the analog stage is easy, it's easy to get there, to watch it, but it's hard to understand it. And with the theater, it's hard to get there, but it's easy to understand it, at least for me. And then there are, of course, formats for the digital space that are concepts only for that are not like recordings of plays, but theater in the digital space. And that to me is very interesting. We did a show, and was a series of 10 episodes, each one lasting about an hour, of Krzysztof Kieslowski's Decalogue, so on the 10 Commandments. And we did that like week by week. We did 2 episodes on the weekend that were exclusively streamed live. They were performed live, and in which the audience could vote. So it was an interactive thing. The audience at their computers or smartphones or however they watched the stream, they could vote on how the plot should develop. They could vote if the daughter should go with the mother or with her sister. They could vote if somebody kills another person or not. So this was what we were trying to do, was experimenting on inventing a theater format that is something else than theater in the analog space, but also something else than Twitch or YouTube Live or whatever you have in that realm of streaming things. And most of the criteria we tried to adapt for this format were consistent with the criteria Anne just explained to us on her input when she talked about the expectation of Generation Z towards cultural events. So it was interactive and it was immediate, and it was not so much about activism, but it at least incorporated 3 of her 4 criteria, which was very interesting and fascinating to me. So if you ask me about which side I'm standing on, I'm all up for inventing theater formats for the digital space that are exclusively invented for that space. I'm not that much of a fan of streaming shows, but we did it with Grapes of Wrath in this festival, which was a very nice experience for me as well. And I think it connects different theater scenes internationally, which I kind of like about that.
Christopher, а вы рассказали...
Well, as far as I understood, you spoke about your online project Decalogue, right? Just okay. Will you please stay with us till the end, and we will be discussing later some other questions. Well, now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Christiankin, who, when I introduced today Dmitry Christiankin, he was looking to me with a surprise. Dmitry, will you please introduce yourself? Will you tell us what you're after? Well, we speak about teenagers. I work with children from the orphanage house. There is a project, theater house. It is based here, at least before pandemic, before quarantine. It was here. These are people from St. Petersburg. They are from orphanage houses and from foster families from 7 till 23 years old. And all together we made a performance that was Odyssey. This is Gomer with the real stories of these children. And then also we have a premiere on the location of the theater workshop. This is what we did. And I've just returned from the tour of Odyssey. So yes, I do work with the teenagers. What is the difference when you work with the teenagers and the actors? There is no any difference. Maybe you often hear a different opinion. Well, if you really take a person, as a human being, but not a functional unit, then there is no any difference. No. Well, you said about the age from 7 till 23 years old. So this is the age of the Generation Z. I'm just doubting if this is really a conventional thing. I believe that this is a very conventional thing. So when I believe it would be logical. It would be more logical for us to call someone representing this generation who would come up here and speak with us. well, Oleg Kristolubsky, he is my age, my contemporary. It is very important that to speak with teenager who is really open-hearted, a person who is open for many different. He's open-hearted. He is open for varieties, and it's important. He is longing for truth. He search for truth, and what I love about these children that they do not have any models in their life. When I used to be a teenager, I didn't like models. This is they're same people as us. We're just going further, and we have the distance bigger between us. But still, we've got different background with them. What do you mean? Well, in my childhood, there were four television buttons, and even MTV didn't work. But all my friends discussed it, but I didn't have that button on my TV, and that was my cultural background. But the background of the modern generation is different. Well, I think they do overlap. I'm not speaking about the background, but the feelings and the requirements of the young people. Yeah, the background might be different, but it really goes through the same values. It is checked by the same values. It doesn't matter what you had in your background. It's important what you have in the theater, and the desire of young people is to have everything at the same time. As for the background, it's also not clear. It depends on where it happens and how it goes. We had a project about village. We traveled to different regions and spoke to teenagers. We spoke to them what they do, what they're interested in. So, well, it's the same thing. They look and they hear to same singers and read same writers as I am interested. They do come across each other. They overlap like a transparent paper, but it's not an issue. Suppose, do you have any alternative meanings? Well, at the moment, we have come to the point when this is the same question with which we just began. So people who were born in the end of the 90s, and their conscience was formed under conditions of with that kind of information. It has their peculiarities, and I believe maybe these peculiarities are over-exaggerated, and maybe we don't have to worry about the specifics of different generations. We are looking for some, maybe when we try to scrutinize the teenager and trying to find similarity between them, we want to refute somehow the reasons, our reasons, what we want to show them. But this is a very interesting question, maybe not exactly theatrical question, but mostly social, and the question of a research, which doesn't directly focus on those issues that arise when we speak about the theater. This is not the question of a digital theater or digital reality. Maybe this is logical that when we speak about theater, we understand that theater is life, and even more than life. But then let us suppose Dmitry tell us, then why we haven't got a lot of it? Why there is just a few of people like you? When I introduce you saying that you work with teenagers, why do I separate it in a separate category? Why is it such a rare thing when people work with teenagers? Why it is not such an often thing like a national theater or national theater like Tartar theater or some other Georgian theater? Why does this happen? Well, the theme of the lecture is teenagers. That's why we speak about teenagers. Well, I believe there are many teenage theaters, and it is also very diverse. I just saw a performance, Dima's performance, and my idea and my feeling I can share with you. My opinion about this performance is that there's a lot of personal statements made and shared with the audience over there, and the proportion of theater itself is much less over there. The balance is different. Because we do understand that this is all a social story which comes through the theatrical form, and it reveals some personal feelings of children. It is possible to do in schools, in theatrical studios, when this is not art but a way of research. These are just different things, different fabrics. That's the difference. Well, maybe I will give a floor to Oleg Christolubsky, who I believe is with us online. Oleg, hello. Yes, we can hear you very well. I just wanted to ask you, you have made a performance, just finished your work on the performance in Tooth, which is called in the name of this performance, I feel the call for to attract all Zoomers to the performance. Is it a real call, or?
Well, when we came up with this name, Elon Musk play, Elon Musk production, we wanted to have something that will attract people to the theater. And some of them will say, no, this is old, this is an old meme. If you want to be modern, you have to do something else. Or there will be people who would be delighted and you know, want to look at this from a different point of view. That was our calculation. Moderator. Then what's the difference? We've been talking, as you could see, about the ephemeral difference between the types of audience and the language you use to talk to each of them. Working at a youth theater, how much do you feel the difference of the context? The answer, what kind of context, sorry? Moderator, the context, I mean, when we say the theater of the young spectators for the young audience. Answer, well, there is no pressure coming from the name of the theater. It doesn't matter. We do have youth theaters in different cities of Russia, and the one of Khabarovsk is an example of a really cool theater. They were on a tour in Moscow these days, and well, no, I don't feel any pressure. That could have been a cool brand actually, unless what Ksenia talked about, and I'm very thankful to her for bringing it up, for saying that this particular institution, the theaters for young spectators, they are afraid of talking sincerely to the audience. They are afraid to see a person and not just a child or a teenager who has to be taught something. in order to see a teenager as a person, we have to be brave. We have to talk about sex. We have to talk about drugs. We have to talk about anything we want to, and do this sincerely, without any metaphors, without hiding it somehow, without making any declarations, or on the other hand, trying to divert it somehow. Moderator. Well, it's interesting that you're coming back to the themes, to the subjects, and we we have just started talking about the form, and we're back to the subject. As if the theater, when we speak about the young audience in particular, is a certain subject. There is a certain range of subjects. All of you have brought this up, and only no, I'm simplifying. I'm simplifying Anatoly. Yes, all speakers, and you're not a speaker, Anatoly. So I'm quite correct. So all those on the floor, all ladies and gentlemen, talked in different languages about one thing, that the theater for the young audience has in the heart of it the subject, the theme, the topic of the production. And it was only, I think, one person at the very beginning who talked about the form. Let me see who it was. Sorry. I'm going to. I think Anne Boyson talked about the form at the beginning when she said that the actual art of the future is becoming almost 100% interactive, and there is a theater theory, a theater evolution theory, that the drama moves into artist theater. So first we started from the playwright, then the artist, or the actor, then the director, and then the spectator, and this is the stage we're living. Uh, so I have a question for you, Oleg. How much uh, the interactive part is important for the audience? Is it a possibility? Is it a tool that you might use, or is it a must? Is it an expectation of the audience due to an evolution of the theater? Oleg's answer. According to my very personal opinion, it is just a tool, as you have mentioned, as any other tool on the stage, light, music, interactivity, video projection, well, whatever. All this is just a carrier for your ideas, it's just a medium. And I think that is why we don't talk about the form here. It is a tool. It is a packaging for our ideas. And the fact that we are in the context of the state theaters for the young audience, for me, we are talking about a crisis. There is always a crisis, and that's why we talk about the subjects and the themes. It's wonderful that there are many cool projects around, but you can take any theater for young audience and you have the same stuff online. Why go to the actual theater? But then you have Dmitry by the side of you, who takes the text of the Iliad or the Odyssey to produce something marvelous with the kids from the orphanages. So that's the thing. The moderator. Well, I think our discussion is moving towards its logical end. We can actually ask any question to any of the speakers, and we can share our ideas that came up in our minds during the discussion. If I had to interrupt somebody, I'm sorry, I had to stick to the to the schedule. So this is the moment for you to share some ideas you want to share, and we're going to start with those who have who are here on the screen. So please manifest yourselves if you want to say something, otherwise you will have to wait for the answers coming from the audience. I'm so happy to see all of your faces back on the screen. I'll just say one thing, says Yegor. It's a bit on a different topic. You know, we came to a certain conclusion that, the generation gap is not inexistent. There are people who go to the theater, there are those who do not. There is no difference. But I teach at a course at the university for directors and actors, and they have to produce a play at the end of the education. So these are people who have started for a number of years, and they will be the actors, the leaders of the Russian theater soon. And I have to say that their vision is quite different. But when you said post-irony, I don't understand anything in post-irony, but it is their ideas and their productions that came to my mind, and I understood that the way they open Hamlet or the way they open Richard III is different from mine. Even though there is not such a big gap between me and them as compared to other professors, even I have this rejection coming up. And then I understand that it is actually a different tool. It is their way of telling the story that interests them. And I'll just say a few words about one particular project. There is Hamlet, and there is the inner voice of Hamlet. And in this particular production, Hamlet's inner voice is a very funny, ridiculous little voice. It's nothing to do with the dramatic monologue that Shakespeare wrote. And when you hear it for the first time, you're shocked. Absolutely. And then you understand that otherwise it wouldn't be possible. This is possibly this post-irony. You don't understand whether it is a joke or not. Uh, are they making fun of us or whatever is happening on the stage? But it is also a way to tell a very personal story, as every director has an idea to tell a personal story, otherwise they do not succeed. And I just wanted to highlight the fact that there is a difference. There is a difference between the generations, and the question is how open we are in order to perceive it and to assimilate it. And this is something to talk about, because there are some people who say it's not acceptable, but that's not it. I would like to say a few words. I would like to show you actually something that I was not able to show. This is an interesting research that my friends from a PR agency did. It is about working on TikTok, and this is a summary of the Z generation. And Julia Kalandrishvili and I, when we saw this table, we felt ourselves out. But now I'm looking at this, and I feel that these are the things which are common to all of us. And among the things on the screen, you have sincerity, you have absence of artificialness, you have post-irony, you have fewer taboos, you have stories and personal stories, you have political correctness and ethics. So these are some of the ideas that adhere to the humanity. I wouldn't say it used to be different before, that, our grandparents would say that this has nothing to do with our values. Well, in fact, the values are common. These are common human values that unite us. That's all I wanted to show and to say to you. I'm switching off the presentation. Moderator, well, if there are no question, yes, we do have a question. I don't know how I can give you the microphone, or you can come out, or well, here is a mic for you. I have a question for Christopher Ruping, who participated in the Theatre Olympics in St. Petersburg last year, and he brought one of his productions here. So the question is on your production, The Drums in the Night. Is there any difference and probably any answers or reactions from the public in Russia and in Germany? So did you feel any difference in the audience's feedback? Or it is all the same? Do you have any difference in between the two?
Thank you for the question. First of all, it was quite an experience to play in St. Petersburg. I think I will remember that for the rest of my life, because there was such a big audience, and it was really interesting for those who haven't seen the play. Like this Drums in the Night is a play by Bertolt Brecht, and in our version it has two endings. So in one ending, there is at the end, there is a decision that the main character, the protagonist, has to do. And it is a question between joining the revolution, so making his own life political, or going back to his safe home, so making his personal life private. And we do both endings. So one night we do the romantic ending, and one night we do the revolutionary ending. I feel like in Germany, where we played for the most part, of course, it's a show from Munich Kammerspiele, people preferred the romantic ending, when he was not joining the revolution, but going home to his bed. I felt in Russia that the audience actually preferred the political ending, when he didn't go back to bed with his girlfriend, but he joined the revolution. Maybe that is just my what I got from that, because already, it's hard to know how an audience is experiencing the same play, but I felt a bit like that. So there was a different perception of which ending would be the better one, or the fitting one, or the one that the audience desires.
Moderator, thank you. I understand that it's quite hard to summarize this rather wide conversation, but I'm going to try to do this. Indeed, we do have the issue of the conflict between the new audience and the new theater, because quite often the audience is discontent with the theater, and quite often on the contrary, they are storming the theaters. We have more Zoomers than we ever had, people in other generations, because the population of the world is growing and the theaters are not growing. We have the same number of seats, and the theaters are becoming marginal, a kind of a religious sect that is not available to everybody. And that means it's something not available through the screen, not available to the large public. There are many theories about the evolution of the theater. Many people say that it will be what the Zoomers see it like, because there will be more experimentation, there will be diversity of experience on the stage. On the other hand, the virtual theater that is speeding up, and we can see it. There are new technologies that can offer you new possibilities of interaction with the actual people sitting by the side of you. So we call it theater still, for not having any better name. We try to understand it and somehow assimilate this idea, but it's very, very hard. So I would like to thank you all for coming here. Thank you for participating in the discussion.
Всем спасибо. Все свободны. Будьте здоровы, не болейте.
Говорить мне вообще издевательство.